first of all, thank you for each of you for making a little bit of time out of your day to come on and speak to myself about all things music. Before we get started, though, how is everyone actually doing?
Yeah, man, doing good. Doing good. It's Friday.
It's Friday. Everybody ready for the weekend?
Yeah. About time.
Good stuff. But we're going to talk about all things music for each of you, and we'll also talk about the band as well. But before I get started, what I like to do with all the guests is I go back to the very beginning. So for each of you, I think Eddie and Joe, am I right in saying you're brothers?
Yeah, man.
Right, but I was going to say for each of you, I'll just ask the question. You can all answer individually. Obviously, Eddie and Joe, some of it will be the same. But where are you all from? Brighton?
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. And how, Luca, do you know the guys through just being a friend at school? Is that how you've met?
Yeah, basically. Well, I mean, initially, I didn't actually really know Joe or Eddie. So I'm in Joe's year and Eddie was a couple years below us. But it wasn't even like we were in any of the same circles. I think it was just needing to fill that third slot. So, we've obviously become very good friends following that. But, I think initially, we didn't really know each other that well.
Yeah. So for each of you then, most people that I speak to on the podcast are normally exposed to music from a young age, normally through their parents or maybe siblings or that. Is that the same for yourselves?
Yeah, definitely.
So if it was your parents, what type of music were you exposed to, from a young age?
I mean, for us, it was a lot of raw rock, fast stuff, a lot of garage rock. My dad's always loved that. Just anything with a lot of energy and a lot of passion, but not too much shine on it. And my mum more loved the older classics like Rolling Stones and the Beatles and stuff. So I got quite that's where most of the sound or most of the stuff we listen to comes from. Me and Joe from early age.
Yeah. What about yourself, Luca?
Both of my parents have always been super into music, so it's kind of always been my life. I mean, my dad's a bassist as well. He was in the Vapors, who we just supported recently. So I don't know, growing up, it was a lot of different stuff, actually. I mean, rock was the main one, but also hip hop and rap and dance, house and garage and reggae and soul and just such a wide range of stuff. And I think, sorry if you can hear that train in the background.
No.
But yeah, it was, my parents have had a massive impact on sort of my taste, and from a young age I was just always listening to all different types of music. So I try and bring that in where I can in Honeybadger, but
so it sounds like for all three of you, it's been pretty good parenting so far.
Yeah,
man. I'd say so. Yeah.
Funny you should say that. I mean, my dad's left-handed, but he made sure to teach me right-handed. I mean, it's not as bad these days, but he was telling me back in the day, he used to go to a guitar shop and he's a left-handed bassist and there wouldn't be a single there might be one bass that he could look at. So definitely a good few choices there. Yeah.
And it might be similar to yourselves, but most guests I've got on, so they get that early exposure from their parents, their musical taste. Hopefully their parents are listening to some good music. But most people I've spoke to start to discover their own musical taste, normally around the age of around about 11 or 12 when they're starting high school. And, you start to get influenced with what your friends are listening to as well. So for yourselves, what age were you when you started to discover your own musical taste, and who were some of the bands that you started to discover for yourself that was maybe different from what your parents were listening to?
I think one thing I was going to say is I remember when listening to them Crooked Vultures back in the day, which is a super group of made up of artists that my parents would like, but I think I remember showing them back in the day and them not liking it. But I know for me myself personally, like I've always been trying to like seek out new music, and I think from a really early age, even in like secondary school, I was I was very consciously anti like the music around me, because it was like Maroon 5 and stuff like that at the time, and Radiohead, and it was just like soul destroying. So I was very much always, at least myself, like kind of against the grain in terms of my peers. But like some of the earliest like discoveries might have been like Slaves, well, formerly Slaves, now soft play, and Royal Bloods. Although, yeah, I mean those guys are a bit naff, but that first album is incredible.
Yeah.
And definitely had an impact, I think, on all of us, because I remember when I joined the band, I know Joe and Eddie were doing a couple of Royal Blood covers, except, of course, you know, they had the wrong combo. They had guitar and drums, which is, you know, what made Royal Blood so good, was that it was bass and drums, I think, at least. I think that's why, in terms of sound, at least, like, that's why it's sort of, I prefer listening to that Royal Blood album than, like, Elephant, I think, just because, like, going back to Elephant, like, you know, I'm just a bassist, I'm like, wow, bass, but it's not really cutting it in that sense for me. But yeah, I'd say Royal Blood and Soft Play were like the first like couple bands that I really started to get into that, like, and them Crooked Vultures that like my parents.
Don't forget about Drenge as well.
Yeah,
not really about anymore, but I mean,
they came later for me. I remember like Estrons were a good one back in day. I think there were so many like smaller bands as well. Like I remember
Pretty Vicious as well.
Pretty Vicious, yeah. Actually, they from a long time. Van, but a lot of these bands like just died. Like a lot of the stuff that I found out, like obviously we had COVID, and then most of those bands like dropped like flies. So it was just like really the big ones that were left. A lot of the smaller ones that I've been following are, you know, unfortunately not active anymore.
Can I ask as well, what age are all of you?
I'm 20, and those guys.
Yeah, we're 23, me and Luca.
Right, so I'm a little bit ahead of you, so I'm probably about 20 years ahead of you, but and maybe a little bit more if I'm being completely honest. But it's funny that you're saying, you know, like people listening to Maroon 5 and all that sort of crap, because when I jumped right back to when I was discovering music, and it was like early 90s, and of course living in Scotland, Britain, you know, the big huge band to come out was Oasis, and I'm just like, this is not a rock band in my head. You know, people saying that this is rock music, and I'm like, rock bands don't attend the Brit Awards and get into arguments with the Spice Girls. That is not a rock band. That's a pretend. That's somebody that thinks they know what rock is, thinking that's what a rock band is. That's not a rock band. That's a pop band in disguise, basically. and it just sounds kind of like similar, But at the same time, you know, there's so much great music out there, and the one thing, you know, people go, oh, it was always better back in my day and blah, 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 blah. But the one thing I'm jealous of the younger generation is, you know, when I was like 12, 13, you're discovering all this new music, but you didn't have the internet. You know, the fact that you've got the internet and that you can access it from your phone, from your own pocket now, and you can go anywhere in the world. You know, it's just a matter of searching for it, but there's so much great music out there that previously you would never have ever known about. You would never have discovered it, because unless you lived in that country, you know, it was just no way of actually discovering it unless they became absolutely massive. And it's the beauty of, one of the great things about having the internet and everything nowadays is just the fact that, you know, it's unlimited, the amount of great music that you can discover, and it doesn't need to be something that's massive. You know, it can be like this wee unknown band from the other side of the world, and it feels great when you actually come across something that you go, that they're absolutely brilliant, and nobody else has heard of them, or nobody else from your area. But it sounds kind of similar, you know, like you think about what people, like when I was at high school, it was so much like the Brit pop thing was such a big thing, and it just didn't interest me. You know, I was interested in other stuff, and it kind of sounds almost similar, albeit 20-something years later, and it's still the same scenario that's going on. It's quite funny. But obviously, Eddie, guitar and vocals, Joe, you're on drums, Luca, bass. For each of you, why was it those instruments that you ended up playing, and why was it not something else?
I think I might have seen a video of Jack White or something, just going mental, and just thought, I need to do that. That's going to be my life now. So it's probably something like that. But
was that from like when it comes to vocals? There's a lot of people don't want to sing, but it's whoever. A lot of bands need a singer, and it's whoever is bravest to step in front of the microphone. Is that a little bit like that for yourself?
I mean, yeah, 100%. It was just me and Joe making a racket, and we decided we needed someone singing, and we couldn't trust anyone else. So
it wasn't going to be the drummer, that's for sure.
I'm sure as fuck wasn't going to be me either.
But Luca, why was it simply bass guitar? Just that was what was there?
Well, so I started learning bass from a fairly young age because, as I say, my dad was a bassist as well. So that's kind of like where it came from on my end. And then, like, I did practice it, but I wasn't like a massive like music person. And then I joined my first band before Honeybadger, and then things started. You know, I started treating it a bit more seriously. And then by the time Joe approached me, you know, it was, you know, the band needed a bassist. I was, I think, the only bassist in our year. So the only bassist really that Joe could have asked. So, I mean, I'm glad that no one else was there.
I said, I'll have him.
But Joe, you're on drums. Was that because Eddie had already took the guitar?
Yeah, I was jealous of Eddie because Eddie was getting quite good on the guitar. And I thought, I can't have my little brother being, you know, this good on, you know, I need to get involved. So I started really irritating my parents by playing on pots and pans with Eddie. I really remember that. Before I had a drum kit, it was pots and pans.
Quality Streets, wasn't it?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
That's not too bad because you get to eat them all first.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Changes the sound as you're going through them as well. But
So, Eddie, guitar, vocals, who would you have said was your musical influences back then with regard to the guitar and vocals?
Probably Jack White. I've always been a big fanboy of his, just the energy he brings to it, and like no one else really plays or sings like him. So
yeah. Joe, drums, who was your musical influences for drumming?
I think, firstly, I'll go with, it's a bit of a weird one, but the drummer from Black Keys, the Black Keys always, I don't know, I always really enjoyed his drumming style. And then as a basic one, I'd say, obviously, Dave Grohl had a big influence on my sound. I just loved that he could hit drums harder than anyone else, in a way.
Yeah. And Luca, bass, who's your influences for bass?
I don't know. I mean, I think Arctic Monkeys were a big one for me. That was like one of the first rock bands I properly got into. And like the first album I properly listened to was that debut. So I think Nick O'Malley is one. Chris Shiflett from Foo Fighters as well. I mean, I think Dave Grohl's like multifaceted, but like everyone in Foo Fighters was also insanely talented. I think, John Paul Jones is a bit of a basic one, but yeah, he was sick. And obviously my dad, again, who I've mentioned a few times, but yeah, I like growing up, I've always appreciated listening back and realizing that, yeah, I mean, my my dad is really talented, and like a lot of the bass lines are super interesting as well. So I'm, constantly trying to make my stuff as sonically interesting as that, to be honest.
The bass is always an interesting instrument because I'm a guitarist, and I'm a guitarist that thinks he can play bass until you sit me down with a bass player, and then I realise actually I'm a guitarist that thinks he can play bass, because bass players, they do approach it differently from a guitarist, but on the surface, if you don't know anything, you just think it's the same, you're following the same chords and that, but it is a different approach. But let's see if you are brave enough to give me the truthful answer. But what was the first professional concert that each of you attended?
I think our parents went to I can't remember which one it was. Our parents went to Reading Festival back when it was actually doing rock music, and
Right.
They shipped us off and dropped us off at the grandparents for the weekend. And then I remember seeing it on BBC or wherever it's played, and seeing like all my favourite bands playing, and then like, because I didn't know that's where they were, and I was fuming like, whoa, where was the invite? But yeah, we begged and begged, and then next year they brought us along, which was I think 2014, which had Queens of the Stone Age,
Right.
Arctic Monkeys, Royal Blood, Slaves, and it was the best weekend of my life. And I think I was about 10 or 11 years old seeing all that.
You're not going to see a lineup like that.
Was that the weekend where Skepta came on for soft play?
Oh, I don't know. I think that might have been a bit later, because it was just after the first album.
Because Shutdown was 2016, actually. No, I've got that wrong there.
What about yourself, Luca? What was the first professional concert that you ever got to attend?
I was trying to think. I think it might actually be Grandmaster Flash, No Furious 5, at Concord 2. And I'm pretty sure a crazy lady got up and like drew a dick like in mascara on his MacBook, which was pretty crazy. I don't know how she didn't get kicked out. Yeah, nothing as big as Reading, unfortunately. But yeah, it was still a great show. It was just like, it's just mixing loads of stuff, going through the ages.
It's amazing how much I think everybody should attend a live concert at some point in their life, because it's just it doesn't matter how good a headphones you've got, or a stereo system, or that, or there's something different when you go to a concert and everything's mic'd up, but when the drummer's playing and you can feel it hitting you in the chest, and you've got like everybody's singing along and everybody's in it together. There's something magical about it, almost regardless of what artist it is that you're going to see. But I think it's something that everybody should do at least once in their life.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's universal. I'd be surprised, like, I don't know, obviously it's just the circles I run in, but I look at someone a bit funny if they said they'd never go to a gig, or like somebody's not interested in music, like they're just on a completely different like plane of existence to me, and I don't really know how to relate. Like I just don't.
There's people out there that
oh yeah, and I'm not knocking it either.
it blows my mind. It blows my mind, because I'm just like, there's those artists, there's those bands that I really love. I just love the whole idea of the bands getting together, people supporting them, and it confuses me when you come across someone that music is just background noise to them, and I don't get it. But I mean, everybody, each to their own, I suppose. But it's a strange one, I think.
I think with the streamification, and I think the way things are going, with AI music as well, I think it's is slowly being devalued, along with a lot of other art forms. And also obviously musicians are paid less, even than they were back in the day, which, as we know, everyone got a raw deal. And even, independent artists, even though they've got more means, in other ways it is still actually quite a bit harder. So yeah, I mean, I'm glad that, we've got the community that we do here in Brighton, because, there's loads of sick rock bands, and, everyone's just bouncing off each other and getting a really good vibe going.
So the band Honeybadger, when did it start? How did it start? How did it come about? Tell us about that.
Well, me and Joe have been playing under that name pretty much since we started playing together. So since I was maybe eight or nine, and Joe was 11 or 12.
Yep.
And we were doing there's a pub in Hove that's still active as a venue actually, but they do all the stuff downstairs. But I had a guitar teacher who put on shows in this little upstairs bit. I'd bring my mates from primary school down for a glass of lemonade and to watch a bit of live music. And yeah, that's pretty much how it started, especially playing in front of people, just me and Joe getting up there. Probably one of the only times he could play a actual kit was when we were on stage instead of his chocolate pots and whatnot. But yeah, and then I think the name I think we had seen some video documentary type thing on the Honeybadger on the way to one of these shows, and then we got put on the spot a little bit. We're like, "Oh, what's your band called?" And we'd not really thought about it even at that point. So we just, first thing off the top of my head was Honeybadger, and then that was what was written down, and then we went with it. And then as Luca was trying to join the band, there was a discussion whether we keep the name, change the name. I think I was more leaning towards change it to kind of...
Everyone was saying, we need to change the name because, we need to recognise you've joined. So I was just saying, fuck that, nah. Because especially, when I joined, it was, secondary school. So, I mean, we're all still kind of very shy. But back then, we were obviously, teenager shy. And so, I just remember, Eddie would just be the most unassuming kid. And then I remember, seeing him play was just incredible. I mean, he was at the level most people are now, back when he was 13 or whatever it was. It was insane. And so I just thought the name Honeybadger suited them and then us so well, because it was just we're not Oasis, we're not these boisterous guys looking for headlines or anything like that. We're just we're here to play some, feral, gutter music and have a really good time.
It's funny, band names. I've seen bands split up before they've even done their first gig because people can't decide on a band name. And, I get it's, there can be a lot of thought put into a band name, and you hear some explanations behind some band names, and it's brilliant, how some bands got their name, but there's also other bands out there that it was similar to yourselves. It was just a word. It didn't really mean anything. It just fits. Sometimes you get a band name, it doesn't mean anything, and you know what it's like as well when you've heard a certain word or name long enough. Initially, it might sound silly, and then it just over time, maybe you just get used to hearing it, but. It's a funny one. The amount of bands I've seen split up because they fall out on the whole band name thing. People take it too serious, and I get it. You don't want it to sound silly, but people can be too serious about it, and it's a funny one. But it is what it is. I mean, it sounds cool to me anyway. But with regard to the band's songwriting process. Is there a main songwriter in the band?
I write I bring a lot of the ideas to the practice. And
so will you write maybe the skeleton of a song and bring it to the guys and then build it from there?
Yeah, and they put the meat on it, yeah.
So what about lyrics wise? Is that the whole band or is that just yourself?
Yeah, I think I do a fair bit of it, but we've all got a few tunes to our name lyrically that we put out.
I mean, typically lyrics is what comes last. I mean, Eddie will usually start with like some killer riff, or like, we'll have a few.
It's always the riff first.
Yeah, it's pretty riff based because it's got to be at its core like
It's got to be.
driving, and then obviously Joe will come up with some mad drum line, and then I'll put my bass in there as well, and then we'll usually argue about structure for a little bit, and then once we've like got the song where we want it to be, that's when we usually start to look at lyrics. And as Eddie said, like, we've all got contributions there. I think Joe's actually done some of my favorite lyrics in the band. Always really good at just coming up with like really interesting and unique like phrases and stuff like that. But yeah, we all sort of come together for different things at different points, but it all starts with some horrible stanky riff on the guitar.
I mean, the beauty of music, there isn't a right or a wrong answer. And I mean, I spoke with someone, I think it was maybe just the previous podcast, I'd asked the same question, and they came up with the lyrics first. And I mean, from someone that also writes music, it's always the guitar riff first, or a melody or something, and the lyrics for me always come last. But that's just my method of writing a song, similar to yourselves. This other person I spoke to, it's lyrics first. That confuses me, but I mean, as I said, there isn't a right or a wrong answer to it. It's just whatever works for yourself. But see, when it comes to recording, then what's the band's process for recording? Do you record live? Do you do the drums first and layer everything on top? Like, how do you go about recording?
Drums first.
Yeah, usually drums first, but more recently we've been tracking bass and drums in the same room, same take. So they're fully locked in from the jump.
Eddie will have a guide vocal and guitar usually, and then me and Joe will. So in the last one, me and Joe went in together, different rooms, but like headphoned up, so we can hear each other and the guides. And then
I quite like that. I much prefer that actually.
So
playing with you.
Yeah, I was going to say, recording drums and bass together. Do you notice a difference in the sound? Does it add a little bit extra?
Yeah, I think so. I don't really know, wouldn't really be able to say what, but it just felt right. Don't know.
Yeah,
it just captures that live essence. Because I mean, before it would be Joe to a click and the guide, and then I'd play to the drums and the guides. So like in theory, it's like all the same ingredients, but I don't know, in the same way that if you all record live together, it's going to have a bit more of a live feel. I think, it's got all those small, like, human imperfections, which, aren't really, we don't leave any mistakes in, obviously. But I
mean, that is one thing. There's quite a lot of bands I've spoke to, and they've said, the recordings that they've created, they're good sounding recordings, but they struggle to capture on record what they do live. When they play live, there's just a magic, something that's just a little bit extra, and they find it hard to describe, but find it hard to capture it. But at the same time, I listen to the recordings and I go, that sounds great, but it's like when they play live, it kind of goes up a level.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of bands, you even hear of like the really, really big bands, the most successful bands in the world having the same problem, that it's hard to capture live, what you do live in the studio. But I think that's the nature of the beast, probably.
I think we're really lucky because our producer's an absolute top dog. And I think, almost in a way it's bigger because, we end up doing like, 7 or 8 guitar tracks on the recorded versions, whereas obviously live, like, it's different. You've got the dynamics of the amps and the sound, but, fundamentally it's just Eddie and maybe like an A and a, B switch. So I don't know, it's interesting. I'd still say we're a live band and we sound best live, but it's like we can, fatten things up in certain places and, round out the song a bit easier when we produce it and record the track. So yeah, I mean, shout out to Win, Paul Win, our producer. We've used him for all of our stuff that's recorded on Spotify, and
Since day one.
day one.
Yep. Here's a question then. If for the rest of your days you could only write and record music or perform music live, which one would you pick?
It's easy.
I think, well, for me, I hope I'm thinking the same thing as you guys, but I think it's got to be playing live. It's just an energy. Wait, did you say I'm not allowed to write any more songs though?
You're not allowed to write or record ever again.
The set's going to get a bit...
But here's the thing, Eddie. I know you don't like some of the older tunes, but there's some gold there. There's some gold.
I mean, I'll probably need it if I'm never allowed to write again.
Really, you know, like 4-year album cycles. You know, we've got to keep them waiting.
So we're relatively early in 2025 still. So what is the plans for the band for the rest of the year?
We got a single coming out next month, along with second of next month, and then we got a few one-off shows, and then in June we're doing a little UK tour, which is probably the biggest dates we've done so far, which should be good fun. I'm looking forward to that.
Excellent.
And, sorry.
Well, I was going to say, but before we obviously finish the chat, what I like to do is ask some fun questions at the end, and we'll just see what answers that you've come up with. So for each of you, I'll let you answer. So imagine you could go back in time, anywhere in the world, big gig, small gig, I'll let you decide, I'll let you choose. For each of you, what's the one gig that you wish that you could have attended?
That's tricky. I tend not to look at old lineups because I get depressed because I think, where's all the good music gone? I know that there's some old festivals in London that were really good that had like rock and hip hop that I'd definitely be interested in.
Yeah.
Probably like one of the old Readings.
Eddie and Joe, what about yourselves?
Did you say festivals or just any gig?
Any concert, any gig, it could be a gig, big gig, small gig, you decide.
I don't know if I don't think they're still playing anymore, but I would have loved to see the Raconteurs.
Oh yeah, no, that's a great one.
I mean, they're just pretty special. I think that would just, the Raconteurs probably.
Cool. Eddie?
Yeah, probably same as Joe, or the White Stripes again, or I don't know, maybe.
Or them Crooked Vultures.
Oh yes, yeah.
That's so sad. How they've only got one album, and that was it. How can you do that to someone?
Yeah. Okay, that's fine. Well, as you know, there's thousands and thousands of great songs being written and recorded over the years by all different artists. For each of you, what's the one song you wish you could have sat in the recording studio to witness the band record it?
I think I'm gonna say one of the Them Crooked Vultures tunes, maybe Bandoliers or Reptiles. I think they're just mental, and I just would have loved to see the light bulbs going off for each decision made, and like what I can faintly hear in the background would be a big breakthrough of the day. I think that would be fascinating, so probably one of those.
Cool.
I know this is kind of cheating because they're still going, but I would love to just sit in the studio with Queens of the Stone Age and just watch what they do. I think it would be absolutely fascinating what they get up to in the studio. Yeah,
cool. Luca?
I don't know. I was thinking maybe one of the tracks off the first Arctic Monkeys album, like either perhaps Vampire. No, probably View from the Afternoon or A Certain Romance. So top and tail of the album, like either of those tunes, would be mad to have witnessed that.
Cool. For each of you, do you have a favourite album cover?
Album cover?
Oh.
Bro. It's one of those things that it's often overlooked nowadays, but I still think personally, I still think artwork is important.
Yeah, 100%.
I wish I had more time to prepare because I can't think.
Yeah.
So many cool ones. Let me have a look at what I got recently.
Yeah.
Someone else say something.
And I'm super biased because obviously it's our band, but also because he was my best mate. He's gone a bit AWOL, but he was my best mate all the way through secondary school, college, and then he went to New Zealand, and I haven't heard from him for ages, but he did the back home artwork for our songs, and I would love to just kind of watch him draw some of the stuff he does. He's called Grafux on Instagram, and his artwork is just insane. The detail he goes into is incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you get a minute, check him out. Grafux on Instagram.
What about yours?
I think maybe just for the iconic logo, Songs for the Dead, or Songs for the Deaf, sorry, by Queens of the Stone Age, just for the little two-pronged fork, yeah.
Yeah.
But,
And last question then, for each of you.
I found one. I had an album. So it came out a few years ago. It's Maps by Billy Woods and Kenny Siegel. It's a rap album, and it's like a parody of the EasyJet, like the in-flight safety things you get in like a big plastic sheet. So it's just like a parody of that. And that would be my pick.
Cool. And last question for each of you, Mount Rushmore. Who is the 4 bands for each of you that's at the top of your pile that you just love?
I think D-Mob Happy, Queens of the Stone Age, White Stripes. How many's in a?
We're going to be decimating a whole mountain range here.
Yeah.
But is this top 4 for the whole band?
Go. Well, you can do that if you want, or 4 for each of you.
I've done 2, and I think I've gone.
Eddie's face up there just because it would really piss him off. And then I could just go there and like throw things at it, and just like if I was ever annoyed.
You did a whole new mountain just for his hair.
I'd write Silverchair all down the hair. No.
And Joe, you got one more artist card?
Yeah, I said already, I mean, the Raconteurs, obviously, and then there's, Drenge have always been a big part.
Seagal.
Yeah, Ty Siegel, yeah.
Yeah.
He just can't stop writing, that guy. Like, I'm just amazed at his music because it's so varied, and it just it's always just coming out with that guy, like, can't stop writing.
Well, guys, thank you so much for coming on, having a quick chat with myself about all things music. For anyone that's watching, they want to follow the band, use all the normal social media, give yourselves a follow, and they can find out about up-and-coming releases, gigs, merchandise, all that good stuff as well. But I wish you all the continued success in the future. And on your UK tour, are you up in Scotland at all?
We're not in.
Not this time, no.
The closest we're going is Newcastle, which is quite far north for us.
If you are up in Scotland at some point in the future, give me a wee shout. I'll come along and I'll cheer you on as well.
Yeah,
Thank you, man.
Thanks for having us on as well.
No bother at all. Enjoy the rest of your evening and your weekend as well. All right, cheers, guys.
No,
Thanks,
mate.
mate.
Thank you. Cheers, man.